Let's testify, man. Oh God, you've done so much for me. I'm grateful and overwhelmed here at your feet. And I could stay here forever, Lord, but you call me to something more. And I hear you say that you have a plan to use every broken woman and man to display just how good you are. We are your living pieces of art. What good does it do to hide away when all of my scars are a picture of grace? All right. So I will testify of the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. For my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, do you believe it? Has he done it for anyone else? I said, has he done it for anyone else? Cause the God that I serve, he's always at work. Has he done it for anyone else? So come on and testify of the power of God. Come on and tell the world of the hope we have found. For our body was broken, our hearts were made whole, and that's too good to keep to yourself. Come on and testify of the power of God. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify your voice. This is my. So I'm gonna testify. Somebody testify. Come on, take it out. Jesus, my champion, the victor of grace, the only one worthy of all of my praise. Yeah. So come on and testify. Oh, somebody lift him high. Come on, testify the power of God. I will tell the world of the hope I have found. Oh, for my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Sing it. Oh, my body was broken, my heart was made whole, and that's too good to keep to myself. So I will testify of the power of God. Oh, let's do that right now, Murfreesboro.
Oops, I'm a little off center there. Hey guys, yes, I'm a little bit trying to get used to this vertical format thing. I don't know. I'm mixed on it. We'll see if it actually makes a difference as far as how many people tune in or any of that. But it's one of those things that YouTube recommends because reasons. So welcome if you're to Josiah. Obviously is here. I see Robert Rose just popped in. So good to see you both. And anybody else that is currently lurking or joins us as we go, welcome as well. So I'm trying to think of the right way to put this, but I don't know. I'm it's been an interesting New Year so far. We'll just say that much. I'm a little tired, but hey, you know, I'll make it. I'm just, man. It's been a real challenge to pay the bills since that ice storm. Just, it's funny because when you're and I really feel for people that this has just been their life for so long. But when you're really living paycheck to paycheck and something disrupts even one or two paychecks, bam, it just throws everything off, and then it takes forever to try to catch up. So Robert says shalom, good to see you, shalom, shalom, and Robert does not like this format, and apparently neither does Josiah. Well, like I said, I'm just experimenting with it. If you hate it, I understand. The thing is that the majority, and I don't know, you guys, what you guys do specifically, but the majority of people watch YouTube on their handheld devices, phones. And as such, doing it in the vertical format fits the screen of a phone. You know, I personally don't care for the vertical format. The only reason I'm trying it right now is as we're nearing the end of the Leviticus series, is just to kind of see if it does attract more new people into the show. If it does, that's awesome. If it doesn't, then I'll just switch back to the standard horizontal, better format. But yeah, I'm with you. In fact, I feel really weird because I'm like trying desperately to stay in this very narrow frame here. And yeah, I much more prefer to be able to move around a little without worrying about being off camera. And yes, Robert, barring somebody having some kind of emergency or something, as far as I know, Nerd Fights is on. We're going to be talking about obviously the latest episode of Starfleet Academy primarily. And I don't know, probably a couple other little things. Also, it's funny. I was cleaning up in here a little bit because I moved the 3D printer into. This room has a small closet. And when I say small, it's really, well, you can't see my hands because of the smaller format, but the closet is maybe 2 feet deep and 4 feet wide, right? It's pretty small. But I was cleaning it out because there's a shelf in the closet that's pretty sturdy. And so I reinforced the shelf a little bit and I put the 3D printer on that shelf in the closet so that I can then close the closet door and minimize the noise created by the 3D printer. It's running right now. And honestly, I mean, the heater's going too. And I know the heater's probably noisy to you guys, but at least, I mean, just listening myself, I don't notice it as far as the 3D printer sound. But it is definitely going. I'll show you guys what's on it later. And also, look, I found this when I was cleaning out the closet. Now, this is an ancient thing called a photograph. Before you had smartphones, you had to expose photons to a layer of photon sensitive film, which you then had to take to a special scientist that would immerse that film in various chemicals and then project the image onto a larger format with more photosensitive paper in order to produce an image for you to view. And so this is actually a photograph that I took back in 1993 when I was on when my honeymoon with my wife. We were in Los Angeles, and we'll see if you can see it. This is the on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, the stars, and this is the star of William Shatner. So just kind of cool. Um, Nothing all that special. I just thought that was kind of fun. And so yeah, they're the and then I mean, man, this week the whole Pam Bondi thing. You know, I don't even understand what that was. Look, I get it. If you agree with the Trump administration on everything, fine. I mean, I might disagree with you on some things, but that's certainly you're right. But I genuinely don't know how anyone could suggest that Pam Bondi was anything but disrespectful and unprofessional, and quite frankly, I would dare say that if, because I know the Republicans have the majority and thus are in control generally of the of the committee, but had Pam Bondi been a liberal speaking to Republicans that way, and the Republicans were in control, they absolutely would have put an end to that. They would have, and I think and think about this. Imagine, it doesn't matter where your personal opinions are. The If you were in court, which and keep in mind, being called before Congress is very much like being called to testify in court. You are sworn in, so you are under oath when you're speaking, and you swear, as Pam Bondi did, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But then asked when a direct question on almost any when now specifically when asked a direct question from the Democrats, not from the Republicans, because the Republicans, of course, since she's one of theirs, they were asking nothing but softball questions, or they'd say, it's so obvious that Trump is the greatest president in the history of this nation, and I think that Trump is just awesome. What is Trump's favorite color? It's really, from the Republicans, it's really stupid stuff like that. And meanwhile, the Democrats were mostly asking about Jeffrey Epstein stuff because the administration has been quite dodgy when it comes to the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And so, even when they asked a fairly simple, direct question that had either a yes or no or an answer that could very easily be like the answer would be, 346 or whatever. Instead, she would either personally attack the person asking the question. For example, in one case, I can't remember what the question was, but she then held up a picture of some guy who was currently on trial in their district, and he happened to be an illegal immigrant and was on trial for some heinous crime, which had nothing to do with the question, right? She was just throwing this out there to try and say, oh, look how tolerant you are of these illegal immigrants that are committing heinous crimes. And, I think there's this, and Pam Bondi is not the problem. I think she is a symptom of the problem. And I think that this is something going on, unfortunately, in way too many of us right now. We're not interested in having a conversation. We're only interested in trying to make the other person look bad. And now you can make the other person look bad in the conversation, but at least go with if you are called to testify, as Pam Bondi was, and you are asked a direct question, and you take an oath that you're going to answer with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, then do that. Now you may want to spin it in on your side's favor. Of course, that makes sense. But again, it's so funny because and this has been more and more so these last few years. And don't get me wrong, Trump is not the only person that. I shouldn't say Trump, but Trump's administration are not the only people guilty of this. This happened during the Biden administration and stuff. But when you go back to like the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, when someone was brought before Congress and they were asked a yes or no question, most of the time, the person being asked the question would simply say yes or no. Now it seems like, and again, it's not just Trump administration people that do this. Like when they bring in someone who is a liberal and the Republicans are asking him questions, it's the exact same thing. It's just in the other direction. They'll ask him a yes or no question, and the person testifying will give some long winded, evasive answer that does anything except answer the question. And then they'll ask once again, can you please answer the question? This guy just did answer the question, and it's like, no, you evaded the question. Answer the question. If the question is, you know, one of the questions was, is there any evidence in the Epstein files that, Trump did something, right? I can't remember what it was, but that Trump did something wrong. And so now look, if you are a diehard Trump supporter, you're going to say no, right? But she wouldn't do that. Instead, she turned around and attacked the person asking the question, or she started talking about illegal immigrants, or anything but answering the question. And to me, that's symptomatic of a country that is self-destructing, and we are. I don't think. I hate to say, the United States of America, as we know it, I do not think will last another generation. I'm in a way, I'm very thankful that I'm an old man, and so I will hopefully not live to see the fall of this great nation. But I'm sad to say I think my children will. And I don't know what's going to come out of that situation, but I genuinely don't think we're going to see the United States as a functional nation as it has been much longer. Not if we continue on this rate, unless there's a massive change in attitude from people on the left and the right. We're doomed as a nation. We are absolutely doomed. So, and the you know, it's too bad because I think the United States of America conceptually is a great idea, but it kind of depends on us being able to actually talk about things. If we don't talk about anything, it's not going to work. And so it's just unfortunately kind of sad. All right, so I know Josiah's getting impatient. He wants me to get to the reading, so we'll get to the reading. So today we're going into Leviticus chapter 26. So let me bring up that screen. There we go. All right, so it's a little different layout, of course, but Leviticus chapter 26. This is the penultimate chapter in Leviticus. Um, and the and by the way, so frog whatever seems like a new person. Welcome, but if you hate this so much, leave. Honestly, if I'm sorry that it's depressing to you to face reality, but I'm not afraid to face reality, and I don't like it any more than you do. I mean, that's the thing. I don't like what's going on, but it is going on, and so I'm not going to bury my head in the sand over it. And Lost Cause 187 wants to ask you a serious question. Well, in that case, I'll pause for a moment before I get to the reading. What is your serious question? And I will be more than happy to answer it. And I will do my very best to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right. So, I've heard something like this before, but Lost Cause asks, I'm curious. Jeffrey Dahmer was a born again, baptized Christian before he was murdered. My question is, are you okay with a religion that leaves a big enough loophole for Dahmer to move through? Now, the way I'll say this, the short answer is, yes. The longer answer is the problem here is that people, I like your like the and it's the way that the question is phrased. People are under the assumption that okay, Jeffrey Dahmer, because he was a serial killer, is clearly a bad person, but Mahatma Gandhi was clearly a good person. And yet, Mahatma Gandhi, being a Hindu, at least assuming that he never ever converted or anything like that, would be condemned, while Jeffrey Dahmer, assuming that his conversion was genuine, would be accepted. And so that seems terribly unfair. But this is under the assumption that you can, in fact, earn your way into heaven. That there is, in fact, a level that humanity can achieve, if you will, of goodness that can actually get you in. And that, I think, is the false premise in the question. You may not understand that, or you may not have thought of this, but it's true. The whole point of Christ is that everybody, you, me, Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson, Adolf Hitler, every single person has fallen short of God's standard. And as such, and we can't even achieve God's standard. We lack the moral fortitude to actually achieve the godly standard. And if you look at it, even today, and it's kind of funny. This is prophesied in the Bible that in in the end times. Which, by the way, I know people freak out. They say, "Oh, it's the Lord is coming next Tuesday." The end times began 2,000 years ago when Christ died on the cross. That's the beginning of the end times. The end of the end times. Who knows how long that'll be? It could be next month. It could be 10,000 years from now. It could be 10 billion years from now. Who knows? But that's not, the timetable is not the important thing. But in the end times, for which we are in, it was prophesied that, for example, society as a whole would not only tolerate sinful behavior, but in fact would celebrate it and applaud it and hold it up as an ideal sinful behavior. And that's exactly what we're doing. And it's not, I mean, yes, there's the sexual aspect, right? Because, of course, and by the way, that's not just homosexuality, despite what some people seem to believe. The Bible basically makes it very clear that sex is to be between husband and wife in the confines of a marriage, period. So if you have sex outside of marriage, if you have obviously a relationship other than heterosexual sex, if you are, bestiality, anything outside of the sex between a man and a woman in a marriage, that is considered sinful. Yet in society, not only do we, I mean, and this wasn't the case not that long ago, but not only do we tolerate every type of sexual deviation other than man woman married, we hold it up as an ideal. It is now considered, trying to think of the right way to put it, 'cause I talk to a lot of people a lot of ages. When I talk to someone who's like 19, 20, 21 years old, to them, it is actually considered a virtue to have multiple partners before you get married. It is, and people who come out, like for example, George Takei, right? He was gay. He played Sulu in the original Star Trek, and then when he comes out of the closet, all of a sudden people act like he's a hero, like somehow he's done some great, wonderful thing, when all he did was tell people that he, has a sexual practice that is outside of what is considered good according to God, right? And you can argue about whether or not that's fair, but I'm just using that as an easy example. So we laud that as being heroic behavior, and at the same time, we demonize virtuous behavior. We look at people who try to live, and believe me, I'm not a prude, and I don't believe that everybody should be, walking up and down the street holding their Bible and all. I'm just saying that. But when somebody tries to live a genuine Christian lifestyle, as an example, if a Christian marriage is typically the man submits directly to Christ, the woman submits to her godly man, and the children submit to primarily the woman, but to both. And the man's role is to provide for the family and to protect the family. The woman's role is to manage the household and to provide her husband with whatever encouragement and needs he has. And both of them, by the way, are called to physically and emotionally support each other. I don't need to go into graphic detail, but you know some of the things that involves. And by the way, the sexual behavior should never be either withheld or used as a reward. It is something that is expected to happen and happen often. And this is in the Bible that neither partner is to ever withhold, ever, except during a time of fasting. That's the only time that the husband and wife are to withhold that from each other. And that's a mutual agreement that we are going into a fasting period. And during that period, you focus on God, not on each other. And so that's just simple how it works. And the funny thing is that now, so that kind of a marriage, people say the woman is oppressed, right? That the man is, well, have men used that ideal, the biblical ideal of marriage, to put down and control women? Absolutely. Is that okay? Absolutely not. Right. So the problem is that when somebody abuses that, it is a bad thing. But if in a proper biblical marriage, it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and and you will see couples that are happy and fulfilled and love being together for a long time. I have been married to my wife now for 32 years. And those 32 years have not all been wonderful, right? Because we've gone through hardship after hardship after hardship, and we're going through hardships. But we have each other. And to this day, we're still learning to be better at, living that biblical household. But every day we get better at it, we get a little more fulfilled. And I use an analogy on a biblical marriage that it's like the battle for the remote control, right? Man and woman sitting on the couch fighting over the remote because the man wants to watch the game, the woman wants to watch the notebook, right? And so in a biblical marriage, the man has the remote, period. End of story. The woman does not ask for the remote. She doesn't grab for the remote. She doesn't say anything about the remote. The man has the remote, and the woman is content to watch whatever the man puts on TV. That's a biblical marriage. But a biblical marriage is also, and this is it doesn't say remote and TV, but you get the idea. This is the way the Bible lays it out. The man then turns on the TV and puts on the notebook. His job is to love his wife like Christ loved the church. How much did Christ love the church? He gave everything, including his very life to the church. He died for the church. So the man's job is to love his wife to the point that he would willingly and happily die for her. And that means that even on Super Bowl Sunday, if she wants to watch the notebook, that's what you're going to put on the TV. All right? So now I think that's beautiful. And I know it's a very long-winded roundabout way to talk about your question here. But when we think about sin and we think about how sin corrupts us and sin becomes so ingrained in us that we actually think, in many cases, that sin is good. We need Jesus. The whole point of Jesus is not that we are earned our way into heaven and we're good enough for heaven. It's that Jesus, who was the one and only truly sinless human being, died on a cross taking our punishment so that we can get into heaven. And the only thing we have to do is put our faith in that. That's it. That's all you got to do. You don't have to be a perfect human being. You don't even, you should, but you don't have to do all the things that the Bible says you should do. You just have to put your faith in Christ. And I think, and people say, well, what does that mean? Because faith is just believing in things without evidence. No, that's not what faith means at all. Faith is to trust. And it's funny because now, I mentioned fasting earlier. Our church does a 40-day fast every year, and we're almost done with it, but we're in the home stretch of our 40-day fast right now. And part of the 40-day fast is that you don't take in secular media. Now, I still do what I have to for the Nerd Fight show, so I'll still watch Starfleet Academy and go see whatever the newest movie is each week for the sake of the Nerd Fight show. But I don't, for example, every night my wife and I would watch Star Trek before going to bed. We don't do that, right? And so we're watching The Chosen before going to bed, right? And just last night, we watched the episode of The Chosen, I think it's in season 4, with the incident where, and which is in the Bible, that a Roman officer approaches Christ and tells him that his servant's child is sick and deathly ill, and that he knows he needs Christ to help him. And Christ says, "Okay, let's go to your house." And his response is, "Lord, I'm not worthy to go to have you come." And keep in mind, the Jews are looking at this guy because this is a Roman officer, right? Rome is an occupying army of pagans that has forcibly taken over Israel at this time in history. And so this Roman officer is asking for, because he's heard about what Jesus has been doing. So he's like, "Hey, come heal my kid." And he's like, "Okay, let's go to your house." He's like, "Lord, I am not worthy for you to enter my house. So please just give the word and it will be done. Because I am a man of authority. And I know that if I tell this guy to go this way, he'll go this way. If I tell this guy to go that way, he'll go that way. And likewise, whatever you command, it shall be." And Jesus' response to me it says so much about what faith really is. He says, "Truly, I have seen no one in all of Israel with the faith of this man." That this Roman, this pagan, occupying soldier, this person who has forcibly taken away the freedom of the Jews, who doesn't believe in God in any practical sense. He worships these idols and, Zeus and Poseidon and all that. But he gets it. He understands Jesus' authority and respects that authority. And Jesus points to that and says, that's faith. Now, what's interesting, and this is true of almost every, actually, I think it is every case in which a non Jew has an encounter with Jesus. He never says, "Now go and convert." He never tells anybody to change their religion. He never tells anybody that they have to go to synagogue or anything. Instead, he'll sometimes say, "Go and sin no more." Now, if I tell you to sin no more, the trick there is that you're going to have to learn what sin is, right? And so, and if you're interested in actually obeying Christ, you'll start learning. And I'm sure there are things in there that you're going to say, "Oh, crap, I like doing that." Well, it's a sin. So, Lord, you know better than me. I'm going to stop. But Jesus doesn't care about your religion. And I know a lot of people think he does. Jesus does not give a crap about your religion. He doesn't care if you are Methodist or Catholic or Baptist. He doesn't care if you're Jew or Muslim or Hindu, because he cares about you, your heart, and do you have faith in him? And having faith in him is not the same thing as going to church on Sunday. Now, granted, going to church on Sunday is a good thing, assuming it's a church that isn't teaching false beliefs. I think that going to church helps build community. It gives you a support system when you have questions, and a great place to meet people of similar beliefs. Especially if you're a single person, it's a great way to meet people of the opposite sex that have similar beliefs. Because if you become a believer or you are a believer, the last thing you should even think about doing is marrying somebody who has a different set of theological beliefs from you, because that is an absolute recipe for disaster. I thank God that my wife and I were saved together. Because if one of us was saved and the other one wasn't, I don't know that we'd still be married. So it's vitally important. And this is something that Paul calls being equally yoked. It's vitally important that if you are a Christian, that you don't enter into a marital relationship with someone of a radically different belief than you. Because if you do, what's going to happen when these things become more important? So, for example, if you want to talk to, say you have kids, right? And say the husband is we'll just pick one, we'll say a Baptist Christian, and the wife is an atheist, right? So now you have a kid. Do you take the kid to church and teach the kid about God? Or do you let the kid stay home and teach the kid that, no, God is just a fairy tale, right? And by the way, I would, as far as peace in the household, I would even say if you're an atheist, you should marry a fellow atheist, even though I think you're wrong. And I would hope that the two of you would come to Christ. But, or if you're a Jew, that you marry another Jew. If you're a Hindu, you marry another Hindu. And the reason being is because it will make a much less quarrelsome household if the two of you agree on the most fundamental truths. And the most fundamental truth is the question of God. And so, because even if you believe in scientism, that is the belief that science will explain everything, which I think is ludicrous, but I understand why some people believe that. Then you should find someone else who believes that as well. Because if you don't agree on those fundamental things, then it's going to create conflict, not just for you, but especially for your children. Because even if and I've seen this, because even if you have, say, one parent is a Christian and the other parent is a Jew or whatever, and you raise the child as a Christian, right? So you take the child to church, you teach the child, you take the child to Sunday school, you do everything you're supposed to do. You really think that kid's not going to realize that mommy and daddy don't agree on this? And if mommy and daddy don't agree on this, it's a bunch of BS. Don't you think that kids are smart enough to figure that out? Because if you don't think kids are smart enough to figure that out, then you're wrong. Kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. So, am I okay going back? And Lost Cause, I hope you're still here. I know I've been going on and on and on. Am I okay with a religion that leaves a big enough loophole for Jeffrey Dahmer to get through? I thank God that there's a loophole big enough to let me get through, to let you get through, to let anyone who puts their faith in Christ through. And do keep in mind, because I know a common follow up is, well, what about people that have never heard about Christ? That's where we get into something called natural theology. Natural theology is the idea, and by the way, this is not something that's like, pagan or scientism or anything like that. Natural theology is actually biblical. It is in the Bible, in the Old and New Testament, and it is the idea that even if you have no exposure to the word, right? You've never seen a Bible, nobody's ever told you about this Jesus guy. Even if you've had zero exposure to the religion of Christianity, the stones will shout out the truth of God. The stars declare the glory of God. Everything out there shows you the truth if you're willing to see it. Now, you may not, when Judgment Day comes, you may have never heard the name Jesus. You may have never heard the term Yahweh, right? You may not know any of that. But that doesn't mean you have an excuse, because you can see the nature of the universe. You can understand. I think one way that Paul, and I love this, is that Paul writes in that the law of Moses is written on our hearts. What does that mean? That's here's the funny thing. That translates very well to what people who are into scientism should understand. That when you argue that morality is an evolutionary trait, same thing. They're saying that that which is right and wrong is built into us. You know that it's not okay to murder. You don't need, to read a book to know that killing another human being in malice is wrong. You really don't. However, you may not understand some of the details. And God is a just God, and He's not going to judge you based on what you have no way of knowing. Similarly, and this is something that I've had some interesting conversations with both religious leaders and lay people alike. I think that the general consensus, and I tend to agree, is that, for example, since in your question, and again, if you're still here, Lost Cause, let me know, because I hope you like at least some of what I had to say here. But if you have someone who is a psychopath or sociopath or in some other way is incapable of moral behavior, or is driven in some way, in a way beyond their ability to control. And by the way, people will say, "Oh, oh, I'm compelled to do this," but is it truly that you're compelled to do it, or is it just something you really want to do, right? When I say compelled, I mean that you cannot not do it. It's like breathing; you can't just stop doing it. And so, if that is the case, God understands that. God, people say, "Well, it's so unfair. God made me this way." God knows exactly how you were made, and and God is a just God. You will not be held responsible for that which you cannot control. However, you are held responsible for what you can control. And a way that the Bible puts this, and I do like this, is that to him who has little, little will be expected. To him that has much, much will be expected. And this translates in several different areas. In resources, right? If somebody is poor, they're not expected to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, right? But if someone is rich, you better believe they are. And so this is why Christ said it's easier. I'm not going to even get to the reading today, which is okay. We'll that'll stretch this out for one more week, which is totally cool by me, because I think this is important stuff. It is, Christ says it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. Put this up here. By the way, if you are interested in the Bible study, please send an email. All right, it's wide open right now, and I'd love to have. But it's a Bible study, not a debate class. So just to make that clear. Anyway, the reason that Christ says it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle rather than for a rich man to go to heaven, it's not some, metaphorical game or anything where, well, people say, well, the eye of a needle is actually this big, wide open gate. No. He means that in that it's very, virtually impossible, right? And he doesn't mean that wealth is necessarily inherently bad, but wealth certainly exposes your true nature because nothing shows human nature more than not needing God. If we are left to our own devices, are we going to willingly submit to the laws in the Bible? Or are we going to just do what the heck we want to do, right? And so going back to, because the reason sexuality comes up so much is because it is something that we humans tend to, we blow it out of proportion. It become, sex is, especially in Western culture, it is absolutely the number one thing out there. Sex and food. And you don't believe it? Look on media right now. I mean, if you turn on look at Starfleet Academy. Oh my gosh, this last episode opened up with a scene that belonged on Skinamax, right? Sex is everywhere. They're shoving it in your face. Why? Because we crave it. And we crave it for a multitude of reasons, right? One is the drive to reproduce. And the other is the connection that you get through it. It's the only time that two people connect intellectually, physically, and spiritually all at the same time. And it's beautiful, but it's also dangerous. And so it comes up a lot because what happens is that when something is so powerful, what do we humans do? We pervert it. And keep in mind, perversion has a negative connotation. Perversion simply means to do something other than its intended purpose, right? So if I take this camera that I have here, right, and I decide to use this camera because I'm trying to put a thumbtack in the wall, so I use the camera to tap the thumbtack in. Don't worry, that camera's not working, so it didn't do any damage. So I tapped the thumbtack into the wall with the camera. That's a perversion of the camera. The camera, it might work, right? I got the thumbtack into the wall, but that's not the intended purpose of a camera. The camera's supposed to take pictures. So a perversion doesn't necessarily mean evil or whatever, right? And so a perversion simply means outside of its intended purpose. Sex was intended for a couple of things, which is beautiful. One is, of course, the reproduction act, right? It's how we produce more people. But it's also meant to reinforce and strengthen marriage. It is meant to be pleasurable, despite what I know there are a lot of Christians out there that think, oh, sex is dirty and icky and sticky and we don't want to do it, right? Unless we're trying to make kids, sex is bad. There are Christians that genuinely believe that. They think that, like, for example, if a couple decides they're done having children, that means they're done having sex. That to me is wrong. That is a perversion because sex is meant to strengthen that marriage. Sex is meant to be this beautiful connection between husband and wife. And when I say beautiful, let's be real, doesn't necessarily mean appealing to the eyes because I'm sure you don't want to see this going on, right? But it's meant to be this wonderful spiritual connection. And yet we turn it into, in the modern society, we just turn it into something fun to do, right? We just, nowadays it's literally, we keep track, what's your body count? How, do you have a bingo card for all the different ways you can do it? And that's wrong. It's a violation of what it was intended for. That's why it's called a perversion. But we want to say, but I want to do it my way. So what's it going to be? Are you going to put your faith in yourself, in your heart, whatever you want to call it? Or are you going to trust, put your faith in what God says about it? Now, sadly, the guy that asked that wonderful question, Lost Cause 187, seems to have left because he hasn't posted any other comments in the last little bit. I was trying to stall giving him time to do so, but nothing. So we'll move on. But thank you, Lost Cause. If you come back and watch the rest of the stream, thank you so much for that wonderful question. It may have completely derailed the reading of the day, but I think that it was worth talking about 100%. All right, so let's. I'll just go through the chat, try to get caught up, and we'll wrap it up. Oh, and by the way, since we've kind of screwed everything up, let me switch the other screen a little bit. Let me show you. I've been, working with the 3D printer, of course, and let's see. I guess we can. Where's that lost cause? We get rid of that. All right. So let me remove that. Yes, and then we will. Oh, actually, stop screen share is what I wanted. And then share screen and window and this one. All right. Too much stuff going on. Okay. Add to scene. All right. So this is what's going on in the 3D printer right now. Let's see, bring this down here, bring this up here so that it fits better. And so you can kind of see what's going on inside the printer for a moment, although it looks like the screen is frozen for some reason. Probably might be because I'm sharing it. But, so, let you guys guess what you think that is. And since it's frozen, we'll just go back to this. All right, and let's stop screen share. Because I know the printer didn't stop because I can hear it, but, it just, let me close this. And I'll try reopening it in this moment. Come on. Any minute now. Sometimes this computer gets a little sluggish. There we go. All right, and now let's reopen it. And sorry, I know I got a little jittery there. That's because I was opening and closing rather intensive apps. And all right, and we go to device. All right. I don't know why it didn't work there for a minute, but now it seems to be fine. So let me try that again. Man, it helps if I hit the right thing. There we go. All right. And we'll go back to this screen and we'll try it one more time. Share screen, window. See if it'll work this time. Share. And is it going to freeze again. Yep, and just for some reason it wants no. Yeah, it just wants to freeze. It can't handle being on the screen share, so I'm not going to worry about it. All right, back to it. Sorry about that. All right. All right, where were we? Where's the chat? All right, so Josiah says, ever talk about Jeffrey Epstein files being released? Well, I've talked about it a few times. You know that. Sorry, are you talking about the 3 million overly redacted files? Yeah, that's one of the reasons I watched the Pam Bondi thing, because I wanted to see her reaction to some of the questions. But of course, she didn't answer any of the questions, which was extraordinarily frustrating. For example, one thing she was asked about was the fact that all of the perpetrators, well, almost all the perpetrators, were redacted. As far as, so we couldn't see who was actually involved, even though it's clear that a lot of people were named. However, the names of the victims were not redacted. Their names, their phone numbers, their personal information was all published by the government. They asked her why. We never got an answer, of course. But that's scary to me. And of course, even with 3 million files out there, that's still only half, at least according to the government, of what they have. And they were ordered, by law, by the way, they were ordered to release them all. And they still haven't done it. Robert says, I found out from here on YouTube that the Democrats want to change my home state of Virginia into another California. Saddens me. Well, that's a little vague. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know what the Democrats are doing in Virginia, but to say, well, they're turning this into another California. Well, doing what? What specifically are they trying to do that you think is going to turn them into another California? Or did you just hear a talking head say they're going to turn it into another California? And by the way, a lot of people, and let me make something clear. A lot of people think that I am like a supporter of the Democrats because I've been railing on the Trump administration. Absolutely not. I cannot say I try not to hate any individuals, but I hate what the Democrats stand for. And so and unfortunately, the Republicans are no longer, at least under MAGA, they are no longer a conservative party and people don't even know what conservative means. And so it's just like the term fascism, it's losing its meaning completely. And so conservatism is just another version of liberalism now. But because people don't know what they mean, they think that somehow they're being conservative. There is no conservative party in this country right now, which is sad. You know, I miss the principles of the old Republican Guard. They have a whole new list of laws and taxes they're trying to get passed. Well, isn't that the case all the time? I mean, I assume if you have Democrats in office, of course they probably want more taxes. They probably want, you know, certain things tightened up, like environmental controls and stuff, and certain things loosened, like the abortion laws and stuff like that. And by the way, okay, I am a governmental minimalist, meaning that I think that the taxes should be as low as possible, and that government programs should be as few as possible. However, I do think that whatever we do in the government program should be done well. And so that means you don't half ass something. If you, for example, I am, and this is one thing that I know my conservative friends hate me for, but honestly, this is one of those things where we confuse conservative and liberal versus beneficial or detrimental, right? And I am a believer that we need some kind of universal health plan because right now, healthcare in America has gone absolutely bananas. It's fine if you're gainfully employed and your employer happens to have a great healthcare plan, and it's fine if you're healthy. But try getting chronically ill in this country. Now, granted, I don't recommend you get chronically ill. However, if, for example, you have a genetic problem like mine, where mine is MS, for those of you that don't know, but if you have, cancer, or you have diabetes, or you have MS, or you have ALS, or you have any one of these things that is going to affect your life, it will not only drain your life savings, unless you are a billionaire, you are going to go broke. But then, if it's something like where you become disabled and you can't work, good luck surviving on the pittance that the government gives you after they've managed to drain all your money. So yes, we need to we need a universal health care plan of some kind. But we shouldn't do it half-assed. We need to get the Republicans and the Democrats to actually work together and to come up with something that works. The Obama Affordable Health Care Act was half-assed, and that's why I think ultimately I wouldn't say it has failed as much as it has struggled, and it is still struggling, right? So because it's a half-assed program, it's a half-assed measure. We need to full-ass it. So the and I would say that about any type of solution. If the government is going to provide a solution to something, then let's do it. Let's not pussyfoot around. On the flip side, I don't believe that the government needs to regulate what channels come in your cable package. And by the way, that is a real thing. I worked in the cable industry for some time. If you subscribe to basic cable versus extended basic versus tier one, tier two, tier three, whatever, that's regulated by the government. They tell the cable companies what channels to carry, and then people bitch at the cable companies because they carry channels they don't like. It's not the cable company, people. It's the government. I don't think that the government, as long as if a company is selling a product, I don't care what the product is, unless the company is putting out something that is inherently dangerous, right? Such, say, food that has lead in it or something like that. Or they are being fraudulent. They're saying that something will do something that it doesn't, which, by the way, is a big problem right now in the world of supplements, which everybody talks about big pharma. Nobody talks about the supplement industry. They'll say that, hey, take these little green pills and it will cure every disease. And then, of course, they put a little disclaimer saying, this has not been FDA approved, and that lets them get away with it. No. That's fraud, people, and those companies should be shut down. I also don't believe, I believe in free trade, so I would say eliminate the tariffs. I think that was a bad idea. But but as far as, but we're not doing anything common sense anymore. We're not. All right. Did you know, or let's see, did you know, do such thing as Celtic Christianity, a revival of it today? I don't know Celtic Christianity specifically. There are a lot of ethnic Christian, like for example, Coptic Christians, right? Egyptian Christians and stuff like that. And that's fine as long as you're not deviating from what the Bible says. If you want to throw a little flair on it that has your ethnicity of choice in it, I don't care. There are churches that do things like traditional African services, but they're Christian. That's fine, right? You want to do a traditional Celtic thing that's Christian, that doesn't violate, like, as long as you're not doing something like worshiping idols or something like that, that's fine. Our church is a very contemporary Western style. It's a non-denominational church with contemporary music. Our pastor wears jeans and t-shirt, and most of the time no shoes. That's our church. Style means nothing. What matters is the substance. So the style might be what draws you into a church. It's substance that should keep you there. Are they teaching the Word of God, or are they just putting on a show? Joshua in the house says, good morning. How you doing, my friend? Of course, this was a while ago. Hope you're still here. Josiah says Trump isn't the great president who. Trump isn't the great president who lived, but he's the most popular president who ever lived. Oh, that is patently false, my friend. Oh my goodness, that is. If you look at the actual numbers, Trump's numbers are not that strong. And so if you want, the only reason it feels that way is because Trump's supporters, the whole MAGA crowd, has been extraordinarily vocal about their support. However, if you look at the numbers of people, Trump's support has been waning for some time now, and and as far as the most popular president, I believe I used to have the statistics, but it's trying to remember. It might have been back during like World War II or something. But Obama was very popular in the first year. Bush was extraordinarily popular immediately after 9/11, but that's because everybody rallied behind the president, which as they should have. And uh, Clinton was fairly popular. Reagan is still has the record as far as landslides in modern elections. I mean, people think, oh, Trump had this significant victory. Reagan won 49 states. 49. Biggest victory in modern history. So yeah, Reagan was extraordinarily popular. But a lot of you guys weren't around in the 80s, so you don't remember. I wonder if we'll ever know the real reason for the 10-day no-fly zone the government did in El Paso. Probably in 50 years they'll declassify it. And it's not like the government hasn't lied to the American people before. That's not an excuse for them doing it now, is it? And that's the problem. Like, okay, and in fact, that's something that during the Pam Bondi hearings was odd. Like they would say, "Why is it that X happened?" And then she would immediately talk about something Biden did. Now, look, I am no again. I do not. I can't stress enough how much I disagree with the platform of the Democratic Party. Right? I will. I absolutely stand opposed to them, but I will not stand with MAGA. All right. I will vote independent, but I will not. And I actually wrote my senators and told them this. I will not vote for a Republican as long as MAGA is controlling them because they're not conservative. And people, like I said, people don't even understand what conservative means. In fact, I'll tell you what: 100 internet points to the first person that can tell me. Of course, somebody will just Google it and try to find it. But what does conservative in America? What does conservative actually mean? When you get into the reading, well, obviously not happening today, but that's okay. It was a good discussion. With luck, I'll still be alive when America falls. I don't know how old you are, but I would not call it luck. There is no fixing America. I disagree. I think America can be fixed, but I don't think that we want to fix it because fixing it means compromise. And right now we are so polarized, we are so radicalized that even the notion of compromising with them, whichever side you're on, them is the other side. It means destroying the country, right? No, it really doesn't. You know, and people that are afraid of compromise, that's at the core of the problem. And there's lost cause with the question. Again, sorry that I rambled on so long that you left. And then lost cause says thank you, appreciate your time. Not a problem. Robert says yes, we are all born in sin. Oh yeah, 100%. When I was talking about that whole thing. Sean says hello. How you doing? And let's see. Big John versus Fat Albert. Well, Big John, do you mean like Big John from The Chosen? I mean, if Big John has the authority of Christ behind him, he wins because can't beat the authority of Christ. But without that, Fat Albert, 100%. Trustin in the house says, "Good day. How you doing, my friend?" Trustin, eagerly awaiting your emails, by the way, if anybody wants to join our small group. Miss Moneypenny in the house. Good to see you, ma'am. Robert says, just like all those nut jobs following this man made religion of Scientology, especially all those Hollywood elites. Man, Scientology is a weird one, right? Because L. Ron Hubbard was a failed science fiction author who actually said in an interview that to get rich, he would, if he wanted to really get rich, he would invent a religion. And then he proceeded to use his bad sci fi concepts to write a religion. And yet, people like Tom Cruise and John Travolta and Kirstie Alley, they, they can't get enough of it. I'm like, whoa, that's some weird stuff. Bigza says, none shall escape the judgment. That is true. And that's why we all need a savior. I will pull a rabbit out of your hat. I don't have a hat handy, nor do I have a rabbit. Robert says, when Trump isn't president anymore, some of us poor Christians should go to Florida to his mansion and and put Trump's so-called Christian belief to the test. Do you like the parable of Lazarus and the rich man? That's an interesting parable. For those of you that don't know, Lazarus was a poor beggar who was spent his days laying on a mat in front of a rich man's house. Now, the rich man pretty much ignored Lazarus, because as rich people tend to ignore poor people, they think they're lazy or whatever. And so it came to pass that both of them died. Lazarus was taken into Abraham's bosom, as it's described, which is not exactly the same thing as heaven. I think that there's a reason this is a parable. Some people do insist that it is factual, but whatever. But so he was comforted in the afterlife. Meanwhile, the rich man was suffering in this horrible, horrible place. And which is one of the reasons that people get this idea that hell is an eternity of torture. And so the rich man begs that Lazarus, be allowed to bring him a drop of water because he's so thirsty. And they say, nope, not going to happen. And so then the rich man says, hey, well, will you at least let me go back to earth and warn my family that this is what's in store for them if they don't change their ways? And they're like, hey, and this is 100% true, by the way. When you talk to modern atheists, this is so true. They said, hey, they had the prophets, they had Moses. They're not going to believe you, even if you come back from the dead. 100% true. So, do I like that parable? Yes, I think it's a good parable because the big thing there, I think, one of the big takeaways is that if somebody has hardened their heart, no amount of evidence is going to convince them. They're just going to say that's not evidence, or show me real evidence, or I want proof. Whatever excuse they're going to give, no amount of evidence will be convincing, even if they're being irrational about it, right? So, people. I got into a discussion with a guy who said, "Well, you don't know who wrote Second Peter." I said, "Sure I do. Peter did." Well, you're just saying that because it's called Second Peter. No, I'm saying that because Second Peter 1:1 is Peter acknowledging himself by name. You can go look it up. And so Second Peter 1:1, and the guy was trying to say, well, that's not real. And it's like, dude, the book, unlike, if you want to try to argue that the Gospel of John wasn't written by John because it's not signed by John, although I understand where you can at least make a partial case to that much, but Second Peter is in fact signed by Peter. let's see. Trump pastor has done some unchristian things, and her son said nasty things in their church. You know, I've heard bad things about Trump's pastor, but I've never seen her preach. So honestly, I have no idea. However, given Trump's behavior, it would not surprise me in the least if Trump's pastor did some very unchristian things. Michelle Davis, guitar princess, says, "Where's Jesus?" Right over there. No, Jesus, and I know Josiah, or not Josiah, Robert already said this, but based on Scripture, Jesus is sitting at the right hand of the Father. Because when people say, "Oh, Jesus is everywhere," right? Well, technically, no. That which we have direct contact with is the Holy Spirit, which, yes, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and God the Father are this. It's one of those really weird, confusing things. That's the Catholic Church and most Protestants call it the Trinity. The idea that there is only one God, and that's clear as can be in Scripture. There's only one God, but the Father is God, Christ is God, and the Spirit is God. Well, how does that make sense? It doesn't entirely, but you know, that's one of those things that maybe we'll understand it after the judgment. Maybe we'll never understand it. But the Spirit is with us now, as long as your heart hasn't evicted the Spirit from you. And even people, this is one thing. Like I don't, there's being infused with the Holy Spirit, and then there's the like remnants of it. There's parts of it like where the law of God is written on your heart, but the Spirit of God is what changes lives, and you got to take that in. Man, troll are coming in here today. I don't think everybody's a troll that's saying that, although some of them are. I think that, you know, I welcome people to come in and challenge and hear the truth. I would rather have someone come in with a snarky attitude and actually listen for a few minutes than to never come here. So I would ask you guys, all the regulars there, whenever we do one of these streams, if somebody comes in and throws in a snarky comment, don't be mean. Don't react with your gut. Love them. Robert gave an honest answer. Don't call him a troll. Don't say, don't be you're being a jerk or whatever. Just, you know, love him and give him an honest answer. Speaking of which, there's Robert's Jesus at the right hand. Josiah says Jack Box from Jack in the Box versus Burger King. Oh, that's an interesting one, but I'm going to have to go Burger King because Burger King has the entire might of his armies, where Jack is just a guy with a ping pong ball head. I meant everyone talking about everyone is talking about the files being released. Maybe so, but honestly, it's a big old nothing burger because, and there's actually some rather offensive things. The fact, like I already mentioned, the biggest thing for me is the fact that they released the information on the victims and they redacted the information on the perpetrators. That, to me, is the most disgusting thing that they could have done. And the thing is that, like when they asked Bondi about it, she deflected. She refused to talk. She didn't even acknowledge it. While the victims were literally standing right behind her. She wouldn't acknowledge it. That's disgusting to me. And she is the person in charge of this? What is wrong? Even if you agree with the administration on everything they've done, forget about ICE, forget about everything. How can you possibly say it's okay to, basically release and dox the victims of Epstein while hiding the identities of the perpetrators? How is that okay? I'd love to hear an explanation on that. The Democrats in Virginia only wants taxpayers to pay for someone to have trans surgery done. More stringent gun laws also. Example: if you have your firearm, if you have to have your firearm locked up in your vehicle. Yeah. So okay. So as far as firearm stuff, it's a tough one. I understand why some people think that we need more gun regulation. The problem is that unless you the only way you're going to be able to reduce significantly reduce gun violence is to ban guns, right? And people don't want to hear that because people want to the Second Amendment trumpeters want to say no, if you ban guns then all the illegal guns. No, if you actually ban guns, if you make it a massive crime to even own a gun, and you start confiscating the weapons, and whenever you see someone that you suspect has a gun, that's probable cause, you pat them down. If you find a weapon, you confiscate the weapon and you arrest them. If that actually happens, you will reduce gun violence. Now, you'll also be curtailing the Second Amendment, and I would dare say that that would be unconstitutional. So I would not support that. I would, however, at least entertain the idea of a constitutional amendment suspending the Second Amendment. I would at least have that debate, and so we could talk about the pros and cons of gun ownership versus gun violence. Now, all that being said, I do think that these half-assed measures, kind of like we were talking about Obamacare, are not helping anybody. I don't think that making a law so that law-abiding citizens have to lock their gun in a safety box while in their car is a smart thing. Because I think about now, I don't do this personally, but there are Uber drivers that keep a firearm in a quick release holster in their belt so that if somebody tries something, they are armed. I'm okay with that, right? Now, there is a risk, and you have to be very careful. If you're pulled over by a police officer, the first thing you need to say is, hey, I'm armed. It's legal, but I am armed. What do you want me to do? And you carefully follow the officer's instructions. You don't let them spot the weapon on their own and freak out because that's going to make things worse. So, there are certain things, there are certain risks that come along with it. But I fully support the right of people to keep and bear arms as long as the Second Amendment is in place. Well, I haven't heard anybody say what conservatism is yet, so I'll save that for later. If I catch up on the chat, I'll tell you guys what conservatism means, since nobody seems to know. If someone breaks into your vehicle and steals your gun, they want to charge the lawful gun owners as a criminal. I don't think that would criminal charges. I think would be a bit much. I would, however, and this you may not like this, but I think this is fair. I would call that negligence, because just like, by the way, if I kept a bottle of anthrax in my car unsecured and someone broke into my car and took it, that's negligence as well, right? And so, if for example, if you have some kind of poisonous substance and you leave it in the reach of children, and the child gets sick or injured because of it, you are negligent for that, right? Negligence is simply you didn't take reasonable safety precautions to prevent something bad from happening, right? That's negligence. Criminal negligence, I'll sometimes call gross negligence, is like it's super super blatant, right? It would have to go pretty far. Like criminal negligence, as far as a firearm like that, would be doing something like taking a loaded firearm and literally, like, you walk into a restaurant, you leave it on the table, and then you leave, right? That would be gross negligence or even criminal negligence. But what I'm talking about, as far as somebody breaking into your car, I do think that is negligence, but lowercase n. Typical Democratic stuff: blame the victim, not the criminal. They also want to lessen the laws on sex offenders and people with child sexual stuff. That I think, again, and I've said this a million times, but people don't seem to believe it. I do not appreciate what the Democrats stand for. If that's true, if they want to say that, oh, we want to, which by the way, sex offenders really doesn't make a lot of sense to me because most lefties try to say that every woman has been raped 17 times this week, right? And how terrible that is. And so I think, first of all, that if a man is convicted of rape, and by the way, rape is not sexual assault. All right, let's be clear. And so, rape is a very specific act that I'm not going to describe graphically, but you guys know what the act is, right? It doesn't mean groping, it doesn't mean kissing, and it certainly doesn't mean leering or whistling, right? And so, it is a very specific thing. If a man is convicted of that, I would say that okay. If I would do a special circumstances clause, kind of like they do with murder. The special circumstances would be extraordinary evidence. So, for example, you would have to have, at minimum, obviously, the beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it. You would have to have DNA evidence proving that he did it, which isn't hard to get. By the way, it's one of those things. And don't get me wrong. I think victim shaming is a real thing, and we need to get over that. If a woman is attacked, she needs to not be afraid to report it, and it needs to be documented. Because rape is one of the most underreported and overreported crimes at the same time. But so if you can prove it, and I mean really prove it, so you have to show DNA evidence. Obviously her testimony is going to be in there. Maybe he confesses, or maybe there's video evidence or something. You have extraordinary evidence that this guy did it. Then the punishment should be castration, complete and total castration. Nothing less. But that's only with extraordinary evidence because I don't want to castrate someone who may not have done it. As far as people who are convicted and yet you don't have extraordinary evidence, right? That becomes a little tougher because, what do you do as far as a suitable punishment? Well, I think it's simple. Life in prison without the potential for parole. And you're like, whoa, what? Yes, absolutely. Because that crime is the worst crime that can be perpetrated on someone. And I know that sounds insane. You're like, well, what about murder? Well, I don't think murder is as bad. Because murder, and yes, it ends a person's life. But guess what? Rape ruins a person's life. That stays with her as long as she lives. If she's 20 when it happens and she's 80 when she dies, that's 60 years of torture. Someone's murdered, depending on the way they're murdered, could be no pain whatsoever up to, hours or days, but it's not going to be 60 years. So the suffering is much greater. And so the punishment should be at least what the punishment is for murder. And by the way, murder, I think automatic life, no potential for parole. I'm tired of people committing murder and getting out in a few years. No, murder, you lock them up, you throw away the key. I'm all for harsh punishments for harsh crimes, right? And those two in particular are the harshest of the harsh. When you get to things like aggravated assault and stuff like that, obviously the punishment goes down significantly. But murder and rape, I never want to see that person on the street again. No 3 strikes, you're out. No, 1 strike, you are out. Now, the reason I say that if there's no special proof, it's life as opposed to castration, is because that still gives you the ability to exonerate yourself. Because if you're sitting in prison and you have an attorney and you figure out a way to prove that you, or not to prove, but to put that reasonable doubt in about your case, then that's something that should be done. But if there is no, and by the way, another way you could do it is even make the castration voluntary. So how about this? You're convicted of rape. You have two choices: castration or life in prison. Now, if you know you're guilty, probably better to take castration because at least you won't be on the receiving end of what you did. You want to do away with minimum sentencing? Oh, I'm all for increasing minimum sentencing, and I believe in. I want to make. I would pass if I were governor of a state on state level, or if I were the president on a federal level. I propose it is a truth in sentencing law. And what I mean is that if you are sentenced by a judge for 7 years in prison, then you serve 7 years. You don't serve 3.5 years because you didn't start a fight, right? I say 7 years. And by the way, if you do start a fight, well, guess what? Now it's 8 years. Start another fight, oh, now it's 10. Do another one, now it's 20, right? So instead of rewarding someone for doing what they should be doing in prison, I'm sorry, we're such a weak society when we want to reward people for just doing what they're supposed to do. How about this? We punish people for being bad. And I could say you could reward people if they go above and beyond, but you would have to show it to a judge that, hey, this is, if you want parole, then it better be extraordinary circumstances. Like a riot broke out and the prisoner was beaten half to death because he was defending the guards and prevented a guard from getting killed. Okay, now we're talking. You know, they also want to limit all legal gun owners to 10-round mags. Yeah, I see that kind of stuff. That's another half-ass measure. You either ban guns or you don't. And by the way, I am a Second Amendment absolutist. I believe that if it is not regulated by international law or treaty, it's legal based on the Second Amendment. And yes, that means fully automatic. That means machine guns. It means tanks. It means whatever you want to own, as long as it's not regulated by international law or treaty. So you can't own a nuclear warhead. You can't own chemical weapons or biological weapons, right? But you want to own a machine gun? I'm fine with it. Because I'm not worried about the person who's collecting weapons or the person who is a weapon enthusiast or the person who just owns weapons for sport. Or even people that own weapons for self defense and are law abiding citizens. I don't worry about them that much. I worry about the guy that's, getting a hot weapon to go commit a crime. Because most of the time, weapons that are used in crime, not all the time, but most of the time, weapons that are used in violent crime are not entirely legitimate. And you might say, but man, if a guy walked into a movie theater with an M60 and just started unloading into the crowd, imagine the catastrophic death toll. And that's a fair point, except that I've fired an M60. That ain't going to happen. For one thing, despite what you've seen in Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone movies in the 80s, holding an M60 with one hand and spraying it around a room is not going to happen. Standing up, it takes two men to fire an M60 because the recoil is so big. You have one person holding the weapon with the butt of the rifle in his hip. The other person has his back to the first person braced against him for support. That's how you fire an M60 standing up, not holding it in your hand going, no. So I'm not overly worried about that. Secondly, people overestimate the power of a fully automatic machine gun. Especially, so putting the M60 aside because it's not practical. If you have a fully automatic M16, right? Wonderful weapon. If I were to own a long rifle, that would be my weapon of choice. For my Army days, I was an expert. I can easily hit, well, not anymore probably because my eyes aren't any good, but when I was 20, I could easily hit a target at 400 yards, naked sights, no scope, right? And that, I know, M16s are awesome, and I love them. So you have an M60 or M16, fully automatic, right? Banana clip, that's the extended clip. That's like 30 or 40 rounds. I forget, it's been a long time. Standard clip is like 20. So we'll go in the larger number, 40 rounds. So you got 40 rounds, fully automatic. Do you have any idea how long those 40? Because, we see the movies all the time where we see somebody just spraying bullets everywhere into a crowd and all these people going down, right? And 16 fully automatic. Okay, so the rate of fire for an M16 is between 700 and 950 rounds per minute, right? So if we do the math, we do, let's see, 40, I think that's how we would do it, right? So that means that the actual amount of time is going to be 0.05 minutes. So let's see, seven. It's actually 0.057 minutes. Let's see, which is 3.42 seconds. So you squeeze the trigger, right? 1,000, 1,000, 3 1,000, 4, and you're done. That's it at full auto. And now you got to stop and reload. And by the way, despite what you see in the movies, a full clip of ammo is heavy. And so you're not going to be able to carry enough to really, spray up a place with fire. People say, "Oh, well, we opened up this guy's trunk and he had 5 rifles and 1,700 rounds of ammo." Great, show me a man that can fire 5 rifles at once, and by the way, reload them, because that 1,700 rounds of ammo is not in one clip. Robert says, I just hope there's still enough Republicans in the Virginia state government to stop all the Democratic stuff. I agree. I hope there is too. But the problem is that the Republicans are just as Batwoman crazy as the Democrats right now. Well, if they wear red hats at least. Michael Jackson versus Eminem. That's an interesting one, but it depends on what are we talking about. Are we talking about a fist fight? In which case, Eminem. Are we talking about a dance battle? Michael Jackson, right? So, what are the rules? Just like unfortunately, we haven't been one nation under God for a very long time. Well, we've never really been one nation under God, and I don't like that phraseology just because, keep in mind, remember, one nation under God was not anything that goes back to even the 19th century, right? That was something that was added in the 20th century. But I think that I don't particularly like that phraseology because we are not too. I don't believe in imposing Christianity on people. I don't. I believe Christianity to be correct, but I also think that Jesus doesn't tell us to force people. That you're confusing Christianity with Islam. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking my Muslim brothers and sisters out there, but the Quran does say to force people. The Bible does not. All right, so I do not, under any circumstance, believe in forced conversion. That being said, So I don't believe that the United States should be a theocracy. I don't think we should be a Christian country. I think we should be a country of Christians, but that's a different thing. Tao, Tao Lang versus Death from Puss in Boots. Don't know. Don't know. Don't know. You know, I've never actually watched the Puss in Boots movie. I assume Death shows up there, and I don't know who Tai Lang is. So, Jason Bourne versus Blofeld. Jason Bourne, easy. Blofeld is a criminal mastermind, but he's no hand-to-hand fighter. USA versus Soviet Union, no nukes, just their armies one-on-one. Okay, so army to army, no Air Force, no Navy, no Marine Corps, right? Just the army. So the United States Army versus the old Soviet Union Army, so equivalent time. Like that would be like back when I was in, because the Soviet Union, well, the wall was coming down, but but the Soviet Union at the time, we had superior technology across the board. The Soviets did have better numbers at the time. However, our technology was like a generation ahead of theirs. So I would dare say that we would absolutely wipe them out. Someone with a bulldozer versus someone with a monster truck. Oh, bulldozer wins that easy. Monster trucks are not designed to take that kind of punishment. The Grinch versus George of the Jungle. Well, that's interesting. Neither of them use lethal force. Both of them are cartoons, so they have the advantage of unkillability. The Grinch is honestly, the Grinch is more of a thief. I think George probably has a little more fighting experience, so I'm going to give it to George. The Democrats in Virginia now want to pass a law that a person has to own at least 10 acres to use their firearms on their own property. That's a tough one, too. And don't get me wrong, again, I'm a Second Amendment purist, so technically, I don't have a problem with you owning weapons. However, firing them is a little different. Keep in mind that the Second Amendment says you have the right to keep and bear arms. It does not say you have the right to fire them. And that's important because to discharge a firearm is an inherently dangerous act, right? So, what happens if you're target shooting in your backyard, you miss the target, and the bullet goes through your fence, hits the window of your neighbor's house, and hits your neighbor? Now you say, but I'm a good shot. Okay. But what if you're lining up that shot and then just as you're about to squeeze the trigger, your cat jumps up on your back and startles you? I'm not saying that you're a bad shot, but things can happen. You know, so, I think that I can understand where that law is coming from. But what I would do rather than try to, and then you have the problem of, noise pollution, right? So there are already, most places have noise laws that say, like, after a certain time at dark, you can't create a noise above certain decibels. And firing off a firearm would certainly include that. But 10 acres is kind of big. But I can understand that because 10 acres gives you a little bit of a margin of safety if you miss your target. I would say what you do on your own property is probably your business, but if a bullet strays into your neighbor's house and does damage, then the way to remedy this is that you take that as as a criminal act, right? So it is a crime to have a bullet fly from your gun into your neighbor's property. And in fact, you could make it an automatic, something like attempted murder charge. That way, you will be careful. Because people need to take discharging firearms seriously. If you're not hunting or on a shooting range or defending yourself, you probably ought not discharge. Well, in the New Testament, the death penalty is still in effect for murder and certain types of rape through those. So that's true. But we are not the Roman Empire, nor are we a theocracy like Israel. And by the way, Jesus was not anti-death penalty. He was on the cross and he didn't say, "Oh, this is so unjust," right? And even the other two thieves being executed, the one that ended up going to paradise, said that they were justly being put up there, and he was a thief, right? He was not a murderer, he was a thief. Jesus was not accused of murder or theft. He was basically accused of fraud. So, and the Romans tortured people to death, right? So yeah, Jesus was definitely not anti or death penalty. I am mixed on the death penalty because I like the fact that if somebody is locked up for life, then they can exonerate themselves. I would reserve and I actually kind of like this. Like California does this, and some other states do this. Is where you have murder with special circumstances, right? So, for example, somebody does a home invasion and shoots up a whole family. That would be special circumstances because there's multiple victims. You have extraordinary evidence or extraordinary malice, or there was torture involved, stuff like that. Those can be special circumstances. In those circumstances, the death penalty is on the table. But just a straight up run of the mill, two guys get in a fight, goes too far, guy draws a weapon and kills him. I would not invoke the death penalty for that, even though I can understand biblically it's completely justified. But I want to give every chance for the person who is being found guilty to exonerate themselves. German Empire World War One versus Ottoman Empire World War One. I'm not that good of a World War One student to say. I would guess the Germans, but I genuinely don't know. Reason being, when they still had public executions, the two city crimes had very low crime rates. When people saw what would happen to them, they didn't perpetrate such crimes. Well, yes, it can be definitely a deterrent to do public executions. I would dare say that if we were, hanging everybody guilty of murder, the murder rate would probably go down. But at the same time, is that really what we want to be? Serious question. Do we want to be like Rome? Because that was the practice of Rome, not the practice of Israel. That was the practice of Rome, to torture people publicly as a deterrent. So when you would go into a city, and this, it's depicted in some movies, but people don't really think about it. When you go into a city, you would see the crosses with people screaming in agony as they're slowly dying, right? The reason being is that as you're entering the city, you realize, oh, yeah, they take crime seriously here. Yeah, that's a bit much. I don't, and it's like people say, well, when Trump deploys the National Guard, or not, is it National Guard, whatever, the troops into these various cities, the crime rate goes down. And I'll say, yeah, and you know what? The crime rate is zero in North Korea. That doesn't mean I want to live in North Korea, right? Low crime rates are a good thing on their own, but low crime rates because we are curtailing freedom, that's another discussion. And by the way, if you're totally okay, just want to put this out there, if you're totally okay with sending in the troops to Memphis or whatever, and in order to bring down that crime rate with the crackdowns, right? If you're okay with that, then you should be okay with gun restrictions in Virginia. Because, hey, you're just curtailing a little bit of freedom to bring down the crime rate. It's the same thing. It's just, honestly, less violent with the Virginia system. Marvin the Martian versus Stitch. Oh, easily Marvin the Martian. Marvin the Martian has his Ludium 235 space modulator, and that's going to completely destroy Stitch. Or sorry, the Ludium 235 space modulator. If we united by one religion, then we would be united under God. That's true, but we are an inherently multicultural and multi-religious country. And because we are a nation of immigrants. And keep in mind, that includes everybody except for Native Americans. So you are the descendant of immigrants unless you are 100% Apache or something. So, I hate when people say, oh, those immigrants. Well, you are one. But, if everybody were one religion, we would be more united. However, what if it was the wrong religion? I think having a plurality of religions is a good thing because I think debate is a good thing. I think that we should be willing to discuss these things. The problem is we've all become so radicalized that as soon as the discussion starts, we start yelling and screaming and telling the other person they're the devil or whatever, and that's not good. Raphael, is it Raphael Gerg? I'm not going to try it. It says hello. Welcome. I'm sorry I can't say your name, but you seem like a nice guy. Robert says Adam West Batman versus the '89 Batman. Well, you would think the '89 Batman clearly because Adam West is Adam West, but you have to remember that Adam West would simply reach into his handy utility belt and pull out his anti-Batman bat repellent. I don't know if Trekker said anything about Just Got Here, but what if a statue or picture of something or someone important is technically outside the sanctuary? I'm not sure what you mean. What if a statue or picture of something or someone important is technically outside the sanctuary? I don't understand the question. Like, are you saying is that yeah, maybe I need talking about Leviticus 26. Honestly, the funny thing about we didn't get to the reading, so because we had a wonderful question brought up by a newcomer who then left, and so we were talking about that. Josiah says the Doctor from Doctor Who versus Doctor Doom. That would be a fight that would probably destroy the universe. Cotton Hill versus John Rambo. That's another tough one because Cotton Hill is, really, really tough. But here's the thing: Cotton Hill doesn't have his shins, and John Rambo, at least, because what we see is in both of them post Vietnam, right? So after Vietnam, Rambo, yeah, he has some PTSD, but he was still fully functionally physically. Heck, he took on the Soviet Union, he took on everybody, right? So Rambo was definitely still fully functional. Cotton Hill lost his shins. Now, Cotton Hill was still forced to be reckoned with, but against someone who was probably his equal during the war, Rambo's going to take it. Sorry. Don't get me wrong, I do love me some Cotton Hill, but yeah, not going to happen. And then Mr. Miyagi versus Cordell Walker. Now I'm trying to remember who is. Let's see. Oh, Walker, Texas Ranger. Look, Chuck Norris is. Chuck Norris is one of those forces that can only be defeated by God Himself. So, yeah, Chuck Norris is invincible. I know, even though I'm born again Christian, I'm not without sin. That is very true. None of us are without sin. Okay, so back to something that I asked quite a while ago now, and I want to reiterate and make clear. I asked, what is conservatism in America? Because we've lost it, just to make that clear. There is no such thing as a conservative party in this country. MAGA is certainly not conservative. And so what we do have right now is a liberal left party and a liberal right party. And I disagree with both of them. So the concept of political conservatism in America is to preserve and protect the original intention of the Constitution of the United States of America. The only time we change what the Constitution is through amendments, right? So it is up to the courts and the duty of the court is the interpretation of the Constitution. But that doesn't mean they just change it on a whim, right? And it means that they have to make sure that the original intent of the framers of the Constitution is being followed. And so that's why when I talk about things like the Second Amendment, I believe that any weapon that's not controlled by treaty should be legal, because that is the original intent of the Second Amendment. If we don't like that, then we need to pass an amendment changing the Second Amendment. So that is conservatism. Why do now liberalism, which is for the last 40, 50 years at least, has been pretty much the position of the Democratic Party, is the idea that the Constitution is a living, breathing, changing document that goes with the times, right? And so you don't need a constitutional amendment to dig into the Constitution, read between the lines, if you will, and add new things to it. That's how we ended up with a right to abortion. Nowhere in the Constitution is there a right to an abortion, right? So that the reason that conservatives were anti Roe v. Wade was not necessarily that all conservatives think that abortion is murder, but that there's clearly in the Constitution no right to abortion. So, but what you have to do is say, well, maybe that's not what the framers meant, but let's think about this and this and this to try and get there, right? That's liberalism. Now, why do I say we don't have a conservative party? Why do I say that Trump is a liberal? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, and a lot of people forget this, Trump has been a New York Democrat most of his life. He became a Republican in 2009. The reason he became a Republican was because he wanted to win the presidency. It was not because suddenly he had an epiphany and all of a sudden all of his terrible ways as a liberal were wrong. I submit to you that he is a tax and spend liberal. He has, people say, oh, look at the wonderful tax cuts in the big, bold, beautiful bill, while ignoring the tax hikes through tariffs. People honestly believe that China's going to pay for those tariffs. China's not paying a dime. And, I purchase products from China, right? The 3D printer that I showed you guys earlier, that is a Chinese manufactured printer. It's from a company called Creality. They are in China. They're nice people there. I've interacted with them multiple times. But guess what? That same printer now costs astronomically more. Even they actually, and this is how nice the people of Creality were, is when I was having all these problems with the printer, even though it was outside of the warranty, they sent me a replacement printer even with the increased tariffs. They took a massive L on that. So props to Creality for that. But Creality doesn't technically pay the tariffs. The importer pays the tariffs. Now, in this case, the importer is usually a company that might be owned by the same people, right? So Creality may own an American corporation that imports the Creality printers and then distributes them. However, guess what? Do you think, like, let's say a printer costs, I'm going to throw some random numbers out. Let's say you have a printer that costs $1,000 and there's a $500 tariff on it, all right? Do you think they're going to sell you that printer for $1,000 and just eat the $500? Or are they going to raise the price to $1,500? Well, they're obviously going to raise the price. Now, then you say, well, I'll just buy American. Good luck. Because you ain't going to find a decent American printer. I don't even know if there are any anymore. Let me see. Other than independents. Let's see. Aren't there any 3D printer companies? Okay, I'm talking about those are okay. Elegoo's not American, is it? I didn't think they were. Made in USA printers. Okay. So the Fusion 3 F200 apparently is made in America, but it's a company I've never even heard of. So, buy at your own risk. And I don't know how much does it cost. Let's see, 32. Okay, so it's $3,200. Now let me. I want to compare this to what I have. Let's see, usability. Okay, so it's print temperature 320 degrees. I can do that. Chamber temperature 70 degrees, passively heated. Mine has an active heater. Bed temperature 140 degrees. Mine can do that. Mine beats it in every way there. But I'm trying to see what the features are. Materials, high performance. It doesn't look like it does multicolor. Mine does. And what is the print area? Specs. Here we go. Okay, dimensions, chassis type, weight, printing. Here you go. Max print size, 256 squared. So 256 millimeters squared. That printer, 320 millimeters squared. So almost a third larger. So it's a smaller printer and doesn't have any features that my printer doesn't already have. And it costs twice as much. So yeah, you want to buy, and so guess what? Even so, if they put a big old tariff on my printer, it's still cheaper than that one, right? We need leaders who uphold the culture, religion of this country. No, we do not. Don't get me wrong. I think that we do need Christian leaders, but what I don't want is leaders to impose Christianity. Not at all. I think that granted, Trump is nobody's Christian. Stop pretending he's a Christian just because he holds up a Bible and says he's a Christian doesn't make him a Christian. It's the fruit of a tree that lets you know what kind of tree that is, and Trump's fruit is not Christian. That being said, if somebody is going to be a Christian, let them be a Christian. Let them behave like a Christian and all that. But that doesn't mean I don't think we need laws. For example, I don't believe in sin laws. So I have, people got all in a tizzy about gay marriage, right? And when the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage was the law of the land, and a lot of people got upset about that, and a lot of people, a lot of MAGAs, still think we should roll that back. That gay marriage, and there's talk of revisiting that in the Supreme Court. I hope that doesn't happen. I fully agreed with the Supreme Court's ruling that gay marriage is the law of the land. Why? Because the government has no business regulating marriage. And now, at the same time, I also believe in the First Amendment, which means that churches have the right to practice their religion, which means under no circumstances can a church be compelled to perform or recognize a gay marriage. But if two gay people want to get married and they can either find a church or they go to a courthouse and they do it, I have no problem with that. Because I say, and it's funny because this is one thing I kind of agree with the LGBT community on it. If you don't like gay marriage, don't marry someone of the same sex as you. It really is that simple. Don't do it. Now, is it a sin to openly, actively live that lifestyle? Yes. But that doesn't mean it should be the law. It doesn't mean we should force people, if that makes sense. We should lead by example, not by force. Baseball players versus hockey players, please. Baseball players would die of a heart attack just seeing the hockey players coming at them. If there was a Christian leader who did not have my values, but was still going to heaven, versus a secular person who's closer to my values but technically isn't saved yet, I'd probably vote for the latter. Gotcha. Well, but when I vote, I believe that it is my civic duty to vote. I don't believe it's my religious duty to vote. It is my civic duty as a citizen of the United States. It is my duty and my privilege and my honor to vote. But If there is a, so this is where it gets tricky when you with your question, because if there was a Christian leader who did not have my values, that means one of two things. Either they're not a Christian or I'm not a Christian. So to me, that's almost a nonsensical question. The problem is that lots of politicians say they're a Christian, but then they do things that are very contrary to Christ, right? So what I generally say is that if a political candidate calls themselves a Christian, I say, great, but I'm very skeptical about that. I don't know you personally. Show me what your policies are. So I do vote based on policy more, and I will vote, by the way, on personality. That's the only reason I will never vote for Trump again. Well, granted, technically he can't run again, but people are saying he's gonna, whatever. But that's why I didn't vote for Trump before either time. Why? Because of his personality, not because of his policies. Generally, except for now with the way ICE is doing things and stuff, I disagree with those policies. But generally speaking, I agreed with his overall platform of policies. But he was such a terrible person that I couldn't vote for him. And now his policies are more closely reflecting that person. That's why we're seeing the stuff that's been happening with ICE. That's why we're seeing all the cover ups with the Epstein files. It's just a reflection of the man in charge. Baseball players versus basketball players. Again, look, baseball players are the Air Force of sports, right? The only person that's going to lose to baseball players might be like, swimmers or maybe track and field, But of course, track and field, they have javelins and discs, so yeah, just swimmers. Couldn't it also mean they're brand new Christians? That may be so, but if you're a brand new Christian just discovering your faith, you shouldn't be in politics. Because politics will drain you and challenge you in every way imaginable. If you're not secure in your faith, get out. Josiah says Trump is too old. J.D. Vance will take his place. Well, more than likely, yes. J.D. Vance will probably run in the next election. However, Trump is poisoning the Republican well. And a lot of people don't realize this, because especially if you're a MAGA, you think Trump is great, Trump is awesome, we're ruling the country, right? You better brace yourself, because this fall is going to be a rude awakening. And and I, I'm not saying this because I want it to happen. In that I don't want the Democrats to have more power. I really don't. What I want is the return of conservative Republicans, but which unfortunately, until MAGA dies a horrible death, that ain't going to happen. Um, but the um, but the Democrats are going to gain power this fall, and the only question is how much. And at the rate they're going, it's going to be a lot. And then, and the funny thing, Trump even prophesied this because he said that if the Democrats win, he will get impeached again. Yep. And I would say this: they have good grounds for impeachment this time around. And if they do impeach him again, I think any let's say Republican with integrity should vote for impeachment. This is one of the reasons I hate to say this because I thought she was insane when she was in office, but I'm really sad that Marjorie Taylor Greene quit. I understand why. I'm not saying that, oh, she should put her family in danger or anything. I understand she left because of death threats to her family. But I'm sad to see her go because I think that she honestly would have voted for impeachment. And I want to see the Republicans take a principled stand because the Republicans need to be. Let's make the Republican Party great again, right? Let's make conservatism the center of the Republican Party again, instead of this right wing liberalism. which is I only call it right wing because basically the only thing right wing about Trump is his stance on immigration and abortion. Like I said, other than that, he's a tax and spend liberal. He might spend on some different things than the Democrats, but he's still just a tax and spend liberal. And by the way, he's so obsessed with himself. I mean, my God, he's trying to rename everything to Trump. I would not be surprised if he tried, with the Venezuela thing, if he wanted to take over the country and just call it Trump land, or rename Greenland as Trump land. I'm waiting for that one. I hope there's no blue wave. The last thing we need is a blue wave and to become like any place in Europe. Well, then we need to. You know what? The problem is that MAGA is what's going to cause it. MAGA is the death of the Republican Party. If we don't get MAGA out now, it will complete. And I've said this before. I know it's all conspiracy. I should have a tinfoil hat for this because it's the one crazy conspiracy that I kind of believe is possible. Trump is just a Democrat who's trying to destroy the Republican Party from within, and he's doing a bang up job of it because Republicans are like, yeah, we're winning, while their support is going down steadily. And this whole, I mean, you say, well, he says make America great again. People say, gee, he wants to make America great again. Okay, what does that mean? What really is going? Well, we have the greatest economy in the history of America. Really? The greatest economy in the history of America. I can't believe, Pam Bondi said it again during the hearing. People echo this all the time because Trump keeps saying it. That we have Trump, A plus 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 economy, right? That we have the greatest economy in the history of this nation. Then why the hell can't I afford my prescriptions or food? If this is the greatest economy in the history of this nation, and I'm on Social Security, I should be doing just fine. But I seriously, there's prescriptions that I have not filled because I cannot afford them. Right? What am I supposed to do? Greatest economy ever. BS. And my pastor says that's a bunch of bullcrap. It absolutely is. It's just a lie that people believe because Trump is saying it, and I don't understand why. Because the same people that are sitting there saying that it's the greatest economy then turn around and go to the grocery store, right? But they'll say, hey, the price of eggs is down and the price of gas is down. Yes, and beef is at a whole all-time high. Well, the stock market is up. Well, that's great if you happen to be a day trader. Doesn't help me any. My income comes from Social Security. Social Security is not affected by the stock market. Hopefully he's impeached. He absolutely will be impeached. The question is, will he be convicted by the Senate? And that's going to, no matter how many seats that the Democrats win, some Republicans are going to have to vote for conviction for him to be convicted. And I don't know if they got the balls to do it, but I hope they do. I'm a Republican, but I'm absolutely no fan of Donald Trump. I don't call myself a Republican. I've always called myself an independent. I've always registered as independent, but I'm a conservative independent. And by conservative, I mean what the word means. I truly want to support. And by the way, when I was in the Army, I took the oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Trump is dismantling the Constitution, and people are cheering him on while he's doing it, and then calling him a conservative. They don't know what a conservative is. The Doctor from Doctor Who versus Superman. That one, I think, man, Doctor Who would just pull out of his butt some kind of like Kryptonian death ray, and Superman would just be over. Just recently, all of these people Trump has thrown under the bus. Yeah, that's what Trump does. He did it during his first administration. He'll say how great, like he said there, he's like, "Oh, Pam Bondi, isn't she the greatest? She's the best person ever. Oh, she's so awesome." And then 6 months from now, "Oh, Pam Bondi, she's the worst. She's a nasty woman. She's terrible." And that's just what he does. He did that over and over and over, where this person is the greatest person until he's done with them, and then they're the worst person ever. And the funny thing is, he has done this repeatedly, over and over and over, and yet the people working for him think, "Well, it's not going to happen to me." No, yeah, well, sooner or later. Especially many of his supporters. He even threw the one naval leader under the bus when he was in charge of the fleet, the coast of Venezuela. Well, he's thrown like he sits there and like. Remember, the one thing that got MAGA a little perturbed at Trump was the Epstein files, and he sat there and said in the face of America's that these MAGA supporters that want the Epstein files are basically a bunch of delusional whatever, and you know what? A lot of them took that and they're like, "Yeah, he's right. I must be delusional. Let's support Trump." There are still some MAGA people that are like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, we need to see the Epstein files." But it's never going to happen. We're never going to see the unredacted files. We're never going to know the billionaires that were actually there and doing horrible things to these girls. We're never going to know their names, even though they're all over the files. Why? Because Trump is protecting them. He may not be guilty, and you know what? I'm not accusing Trump of anything except protecting the people that are guilty. That he is absolutely doing, and that is disgusting. I'm waiting for the sound of the dead in Christ shall rise, non-denominational Emmanuel's faith tabernacle. I don't know that particular church, but at the same time, yeah, I'm leaning towards independence. I'm not sure exactly what you mean there. So I was just saying earlier that as a Christian, from what Christ said about the woman caught in adultery, I don't have the right to impose the death penalty on anyone. Well, here's the thing. I think that Christ was also talking about, this is like I was saying before, sin law, right? A law that is, like for example, adultery. I don't even, I know that some people find this controversial. I don't think that if the only crime that you commit in adultery is basically breach of contract, and that's not technically a crime. That's a civil matter. So it's grounds for divorce. And by the way, Christ even says it's grounds for divorce. But it is absolutely grounds for divorce. However, should it be illegal? I don't think so. I think that if two consulting, I don't think that, it's kind of funny because here's what people are going to think: I'm a liberal, but I don't think anything that two consenting adults do, or three or four, or however many consenting adults of whatever 700 genders there are, right? Whatever consenting adults do to themselves, I'm fine with. Heck, I'm even fine. Look, if somebody, and there are people like this, was weird, but whatever. There are people that are like, "Ooh, I want to be cannibalized. I want you to cut off my finger and eat it or whatever." Look, if you're consenting and you want to do that, fine. It's weird, it's destructive, and it's stupid, but go ahead. I don't think it should be illegal. It's a sin, but I don't think that it should be illegal. And yeah, you're not without sin. So it was, and that's the thing. Like I said, with the adultery thing, I don't think that's the same as laws or things that are actual harmful, damage doing things like theft and murder and assault and that kind of thing. That's a little different. A lot of you don't care for Bernie Sanders, but wife and I love him. Bernie Sanders, I take with a grain of salt. I think that he has he points out this is here's the problem I have with Democrats right now is that I disagree with almost everything the Democrats stand for, but they're almost always right when they're criticizing Trump right now, and that bugs me. Why can't we have a principled conservative party in this country? Just curious, what's your opinion on Schoenhead? I don't know who that is or what that is. I mean, look it up real quick. Maybe it's something I'm just not thinking of. Shoeonhead. Schoenhead. TikTok trad wife. Shoe on heads. You know, what the heck is she? So is she it says song? So she a singer? I see one of those things that I don't really care for. That at least it's quoted as being her is one of those people that say, oh, you know, people talk about conservative violence, but liberals are the most violent and whatever. That's don't get me wrong. I disagree with almost everything liberals stand for, but you know what they don't generally do? Pick a fight. And you can cite Antifa all you want, but generally speaking, liberals are not violent people any more than conservatives are. And there are plenty, And by the way, you know what you don't generally see is liberals stockpiling weapons. So yeah, that's more of a conservative thing for some reason. If we were a autocracy or monarchy or oligarchy, we wouldn't have these annoying problems we have today. Yeah, and we'd also have less rights, probably be oppressed in some way, maybe slaves. On my 99-year-old dad's side of the family, related to this singing Henson family in Alabama, thank God for the lighthouse. Okay. Bernie Sanders is a communist, but he's made some good points. He's actually not a communist. He is a socialist. There is a difference. She's a political commentator. Okay. Well, you know, I see some pictures of her. I don't think I've ever actually watched her, so I don't know anything about her. We need more renegades in the public office, not trumpet. I call trumpeters, or magtards. Since MAGA people like to call liberals libtards, I'm going to call them magtards. But no, I don't necessarily think we need renegades. We need principled conservatives. I retired in 2010 on as a scuba welder for several offshore oil platforms. Wife retired from being a registered nurse. Very cool. Well, thank your wife for her wonderful service to the community, and thank you for keeping the oil flowing. It was like a few days ago, Forgotten History did a video about Jimmy Carter. I agree with him that he was just too nice a guy to have been president. Yeah, Jimmy Carter, he was, probably the closest thing we had to a true fruit-bearing Christian as president. And, he wasn't a very effective one. I think George Bush was a genuine Christian. George W. Bush, I should say. But I can't really think of any others that when I look at them and I think, oh, that's a person that I would see in church being earnest. Most of them I think that's a person that would go to church so that the cameras can see him. Spider-Man versus Toyman from DC. Oh, Spider-Man probably. Toyman's got some cool gadgets, don't get me wrong, and one of the gadgets could definitely be more powerful than Spider-Man, but Spider-Man's spider sense makes him virtually impossible to hit, and Toyman himself is just a normal guy, so all Spider-Man has to do is get one hit in and it's over. Don't need the orange invasive species in the White House. Look, annoying orange, whatever you want to call him, I try not to be too abrasive with my language about Trump because, look, he's the president of the United States. And as much as I disagree with him, he's still president of the United States. And so I try to refer to him as Donald Trump, the president, Mr. Trump, President Trump, but I'm not going to call him names. I will, however, call the MAGA movement names because the MAGA movement is not a person. So that's why I say magtards. When I say magtards, I'm referring to the MAGA movement as a whole, not an individual. No, I meant more Republicans continues the former Republican Party of the Reagan years. Oh, I agree. Reagan was a great Republican. And, and by the way, if you want to look at the greatest economic turnaround in history, look at what happened from Carter through Reagan. That's conservative principles at work. But people just say, Carter broke everything and then it got better. But people forget about the Reagan recovery. That's why Reagan won in the biggest landslide, 49 states. Which is ridiculous. Nobody gets 49 states. And Ronald says, without Elon Musk's $270 million campaign donations, Trump wouldn't have made the presidency. Well, and you see, that's another example of what we were talking about earlier. So Elon Musk, I think, I don't know if Trump wouldn't have, because it's a crystal ball. I don't know if he would have or wouldn't have won. It would have been much closer. But, yeah, Elon Musk helped Trump get in. And I think in exchange for the whole Doge shenanigans, so Elon can get his hands on all the computer systems. However, the second Elon was no longer useful, they hated each other. That's how Trump operates. And idiots, I don't want to say idiots, low IQ MAGA people like Pam Bondi or Christy Nome or any of these others, they think somehow that, oh, sure, he did it to Elon Musk. Sure, he did it to half the people that worked for him in the previous administration. But not me. Never me. They came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I said nothing. They came for the black people, but I wasn't black, so I said nothing. They came for the disabled, but I'm not disabled, so I said nothing. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak up.